I'd like to call this meeting of your Newark City Council to order. Our first meeting in January. Autumn, please call the roll.
Mr. Cost.
Here.
Mrs. Floyd.
Here.
Mr. Frazier.
Here.
Ms. Hall.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Present.
Mr. Marmee.
Present.
Mr. Rath.
Here.
Mr. Willetta.
Here.
Mr. Blake.
Here.
And Mr. Buck.
Here. We have all here this evening. If you please rise for the invocation by Mr. Johnson and join me in the pledge afterwards.
Will you bow your heads in prayer? Lord, we come to you at the beginning of the new year. Be with us through this year. We need your guidance and your presence with us. Help us to meet the new year with anticipation of a better order, and help us build a wonderful future for the city of Newark. Bless those in need. Be with those in joy. Be with our city and our state, our nation and the world, and bring us peace. And may we learn to live together and look to our developing our strengths and diminishing our weaknesses. With your help and presence, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Will you please join me in the pledge? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda this evening, we have caucus. That's the time for council to discuss anything pertinent to the agenda tonight. Do we have anything? Okay. Next, we'll go to the minutes of our council meeting of December 27, 2016. Do we have a motion to approve those? Motion by Mr. Rath, second by Mr. Johnson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Thank you. We have one report of standing committees tonight, one from Finance. Without objection, that will be received and filed. Under reports from city officials, we have the City Income Tax Administrator Barb Job's Income Tax Revenue Report for the period ending December 15, 2016. Without objection, and if I could read it, that will be received and filed. Next, under communications, we have two, both from the Ohio Division of Liquor Control, and one on request for a new liquor license for Frank and Sammy's LLC 34 South 3rd Street, and a request for a transfer of liquor license from Coughlin Investments DBA Quick and Cold to Backup Plan 2 LLC DBA Quick and Cold 998 North 21st Street drive-thru. Without objection, those will be received and filed. Next, we have comments from citizens. There's two sections for citizens' comments. One is now and one is after our one piece of legislation. Basically, this is not a debate with council. This is just your opportunity to be heard. Do we have anyone for this first section of citizens' comments? Next, we'll go on to resolutions on the second reading, 16-103.
Resolution 16-103 by Mr. Rath, Mr. Cost, Mr. Johnson, Mrs. Floyd, and Mr. Marmee. A resolution cooperating with ODOT for the project that consists of addition of a turn lane at the State Route 16 eastbound off-ramp at the Church Street exit ramp, Ramp C, Ramp 45054, lying within the city of Newark.
You've heard the second reading of 16-103. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 16-103.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Rath, second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any discussion on 16-103?
No.
Anyone else?
Okay.
Please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Cost,
Yes.
Mrs. Floyd,
Yes.
Mr. Frazier,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Marmee,
Yes.
Mr. Rath,
Yes.
Mr. Willetta,
Yes.
Mr. Blake,
Yes.
and Mr. Buck.
Yes. 16-103 passes 10-0. And that concludes our legislation this evening. Next on the agenda, we have comments from citizens. Again, a second time. Again, this is not a debate with council. This is just your opportunity to be heard. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand so I can ask you to come up. Anyone? Mr. Shook?
Thank you to the City Council and to the administration for
Just
giving
give
me...
us your name and address for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've never spoken at a public meeting. Christopher Shook, address is 572 Honeycutt Drive in Reynoldsburg, Ohio. I want to thank the City Council and the administration for giving me an opportunity to speak this evening to address the recent settlement agreement between Council President Don Ellington and the Ohio Ethics Commission. As some in here may know, I represented Mr. Ellington during the course of the investigation by the Commission, and I am quite familiar with the facts and the law that were applicable in this situation. My intent here tonight is to clear up any potential misconceptions. First and foremost, it should be noted that Mr. Ellington was fully cooperative throughout the course of the investigation. I know that the investigation took more than 2 years, but I can assure this body that that was not as a result of any delay on Mr. Ellington's part. He turned over all pertinent documents promptly upon request, and he did submit to an interview with investigators and counsel for the Commission. Throughout the process, it was apparent that Mr. Ellington was deeply committed to a swift resolution of the problem. Now, the reason it took so long is because there was a legitimate question as to whether Mr. Ellington had done anything wrong. And as is noted in the settlement agreement that was reached, the transactions in question were conducted at arm's length by another real estate agent. And the Commission found that Mr. Ellington had no direct involvement in those sales. Further, they found that this City Council did not act directly in relation to any of these transactions. Further, and probably most important, the Commission found no evidence that Mr. Ellington used the authority of his public office to secure these transactions. I would also note that Mr. Ellington disclosed and sought advice regarding whether these sales should take place, and he sought that advice directly from the city. It was his understanding that there were no ethical issues, and I can assure you that it came as quite a surprise to him when an investigation was opened up. Now, ultimately, the Ethics Commission determined that there was an inadvertent minor violation. They further determined that there were several mitigating circumstances which warranted the settlement agreement. And although we felt there was a full defense to this finding, we felt that after more than 2 years, it was in the best interests of the city and Mr. Ellington's family to enter into an agreement. This was a negotiated agreement, and as part of that agreement, Mr. Ellington has voluntarily agreed to pay to the city a substantial portion of the commissions that he received. This seemed to him, in light of what we learned during the investigation, to be the right thing to do. I can assure this body that no one is more upset that this occurred than Mr. Ellington himself. As he indicated throughout the course of the process, he was adamant that he would not have allowed these sales to take place if he thought there was anything wrong. The amount of money was simply too trivial, really, to justify a person's reputation in the community. And that much was quite apparent to me personally from the outset. Now, I understand that there may be some intuitive appeal to making this out to be something more than it is. I fully understand how politics can affect objective consideration of the facts and circumstances. And I'm certain that it's no surprise to anyone in here that Mr. Ellington and I are members of different political parties. That has never been an issue for me, and I know it was never an issue for Don. And I can tell you that I have the utmost respect for the professionalism and cooperation he demonstrated throughout the investigation and throughout the ordeal that he and his family went through. I hope that is appreciated. Human error is a part of everyday life. I think it's impossible for anyone, and I include myself in that, to claim perfection in their personal or professional lives. At its worst, this situation was, as the Ethics Commission determined, an honest mistake. And I hope that we can take this as a learning lesson for the future rather than engaging in personal attacks. If there's any questions about the investigation or the settlement agreement that was reached, I am here to answer those questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shook.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Let's move on to miscellaneous. Mr. Cox. Well, wait a minute. Oh, I'm sorry. City Administration.
Yes. Thank you. I simply wanted to congratulate the fire department on their work over the holidays. They had 4 working fires over the holiday break, and to identify or to recognize the Newark Police Department for the unfortunate robbery and shooting on Day Avenue, and they had the suspect in custody within 12 hours. So it was a good job by our public safety forces, and I think we need to recognize that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Director. Anyone else? Mr. Motter?
Good evening, and thank you. I just want to let all of you know that the property known as Newark Processing Site, where there has been a fair amount of cleanup over the years with the Army Corps of Engineers to clean up the aluminum dross on that site. Then the Department of Development also had a grant to do additional remediation and capping of that 60-some acres out there. Was successful, and then AEP Energy, and I got to recognize Mr. Loomis and his department have put together a contract to put a solar array field on that property, those 40-some acres of the old Newark processing site. So pretty exciting. We've taken an unproductive piece of property, we've remediated it, and now put it back into useful productivity and use. And it's going to provide power to the Newark City Sewage Water Treatment Plant. So, Mr. Loomis, thank you for all your hard work on that project. Just wanted to let the council know. Thank you.
Mr. Motter. Law Director Sassen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll pass.
Mayor Hall.
I will pass also, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cost.
I will pass, thank you.
Mrs. Floyd.
Just there are some good shows coming up at the Midland, so pay attention to the media and go to the Midland. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Floyd. Mr. Frazier.
Congratulations to the police and the fire department on a job well done, as always, and congratulations, Director Marr, and the progress that we're making. One big announcement is January 14th, 4:30 to 6:30. The HHCA is having their annual fundraiser at the Central Christian Church on Rugg Avenue. $8 for a ticket. It's on an auction as well. All the proceeds go to a scholarship, a medium project in the North Street Park. So your attendance is welcome, and tell your friends and family to come as well. With the new year comes new opportunity, and I just want to say that it's a pleasure to serve with all you, and especially Mr. Allington. And I've appreciated what you've done in this role and help guide me and direct me and make sure that I don't get too out of order when I'm here. And so I've always had the most respect for everybody here, including yourself. And I'm glad that this phase of your political career is over and you can focus on the future. And so with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. I'm not going to help you along anymore, but thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Ms. Hall.
Yeah, I just want to share some information. And I have to read this because they're specific about some information here. Recently, I was offered the opportunity to apply for an interesting grant. We have been awarded this grant, but now we have to do the work. This is a pay-it-forward student philanthropy grant through Ohio Campus Compact, generously funded by the Licking County Foundation. These grant dollars are to be set aside for the Newark City Animal Control for help in the needs of abandoned, abused animals and possible clinics for spay and neuter. Also to have the ability to accept donations in dollars or food or with vet bills. This will also be a community service philanthropic learning project for COTC first-year graphic design students. They will be required to design a logo and brochure to discuss the importance of giving and volunteering and why spay and neutering your dog or cat is so important. Students that sign up will spend some time with our animal control officer and police officers at the station, not right along, to learn about a day in the life of. And these students who volunteer will be required to write a report on what they have learned. I want to thank Ohio Campus Compact, Licking County Foundation, and COTC for this opportunity. And with that, I pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Mr. Johnson.
I just want to wish everyone a Happy New Year and look forward to another year working with the city.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. Marmon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I need to call a Finance Committee meeting. Being the true sports fan that I am, I'm going to comment on the game that occurred this last weekend. It was pretty embarrassing, and I kind of was down about it, but then I really just stepped back and kind of put things into perspective. First thing, None of our coaches punched anyone. We held the Clemson Tigers to only 31 points. I think that was an accomplishment that night. And then I really thought that I was truly embarrassed by the showing of the Buckeyes. But then Mariah Carey really put it into perspective. It wasn't so bad. And with that, I pass.
Mr. Rath.
Thank you. I'll call a service committee meeting. And I am going to address an issue that's really bothering me right now. Don, I want to congratulate you for completing your investigation through the Ethics Commission. Known you for a long time. Never known you to be anything but a person of high character and integrity. I appreciate that. For those who have served with counsel on me or listened to me from counsel, you'll know my character, or I guess you'll kind of know that the one thing that bothers me the most, that irritates me the most, is the misrepresentation of facts. So Mr. Shook, when you come up here tonight to give us your explanation of the facts, I appreciate that, because I feel confident that that is not a misrepresentation and that is an actual accounting of what happened. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do that. That means a lot. The fact that you stated that Mr. Ellington sought advice from the city prior to the sale of the buildings. I know that's true because I was on council at the time and I remember when that happened. The fact that you said the Ethics Commission called this an inadvertent minor infraction, I think speaks volumes. And you also called it an honest mistake. An inadvertent minor infraction leads itself to believe that it is an honest mistake. And I feel bad for what you've had to go through, because it's not easy to have your name drugged through the mud, whether you deserve it or not. What's even more difficult to stomach is the fact that one of your peers has the audacity to call you corrupt in print in our local newspaper. And that person puts himself on such a high moral ground, the same person that took more than his annual salary as contributions from unions believes that he has the high moral ground to be able to call you corrupt without even having all of the facts. That is a misrepresentation of facts. And Mr. Roletta, I'm appalled, absolutely appalled and ashamed to have you on council with me tonight. I've disagreed with you in the past. That's what people do. I have no problems with disagreeing on issues. I have no problems with voting differently on issues. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. But for what you did, that's just absolutely appalling and immature. And that'll come back to haunt you. I pass.
Mr. Lott.
Thank you, Mr. Ellington. Mr. Rath, thanks for your comments. As far as the facts go, I do have a copy of the settlement agreement right here. And I'm not going to get into a battle about this, but you trying to compare something that was completely legal to something that was illegal is not really a valid comparison. I don't see anything about inadvertent minor offense in here, but I do see in lieu of referral to a prosecutor, Ellington agrees to accept a public reprimand and pay restitution of over $6,000 to the city. And frankly, I'm glad this is over with as well. Not glad to see you grandstand about it. I didn't think anyone would be bringing this up tonight. I didn't plan on talking about it. But that will pass.
Thank you, Mr. Lott. Mr. Blake?
Do I have an opportunity to respond to that?
Mr. Blake?
Well, we're having a great time in the South End. So we just had an effort called Inspiring Christmas Cards, where our goal originally was to raise $500 for grocery cards, which we're going to turn around and take and give to people in the neighborhood as sort of a new act of random kindness. Our goal was $500 and we actually raised over $1,000. So it shows that during the holiday season, people had a heart of joy and kindness and willing to spread some good cheer. And so we're looking to pass those cards out this Saturday. Myself and some other members of the South Newark Civic Association are going to meet up, and we're randomly going to go around and pass these cards out to people in low-income neighborhoods and hopefully give them some cheer and an opportunity to just help them out during the season. So that's exciting things that were happening here in the South End, and that'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Mr. Bud.
Thank you, Mr. President. Wanted to compliment you, Mr. Motter and Barbara Gilks, for the grant that was awarded for the 2 clean diesel trucks. That's a good thing, and also hope, and I'm sure you are, but again, this year applying for grants for summer help, within the parks and cemetery, that's always been very valuable. So I'm sure that's on your plate. Just wanted to bring that up, as I'm sure that time is coming about soon. And with that, Don, you're a great man, great dad. Kids have all turned out very well. They all have successful careers. Proud to call you a fellow councilman. That'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just got a couple housekeeping things here. This is now our time for our 5-year charter review. The Charter Review Commission meets every 5 years, and this is the year that would have to happen. 5 people are on this commission. They have to live in the city of Newark. We need to choose these folks by the end of March, according to the charter. Hopefully going to choose these folks on our March 20th meeting. If anyone out there is interested, please send your name, address, contact info, maybe a couple sentences about you and about why you'd like to be on the committee. Maybe send it, if you could, maybe we could send it to Autumn Klein. That's AKLEIN@NewarkOhio.net. We'll also put a little blurb in the Advocate, or if anybody knows anyone, just have them get in touch with Autumn. We also have to know if you're not because I'm nosy, but we have to know if you're a Democrat or Republican. The charter calls for 3 of one group and 2 of the other. So that's the only reason we're asking that question. So if you know anyone, please have them get in touch with Autumn. Again, we need 5 people. So if we can get more than that, that would be great. And then we'll narrow it down to 5. And hopefully our March 20th meeting, we can approve them and get them started. I was going to make a couple comments tonight, but I think I'm just going to let it go with what Mr. Shook said. Thank you very much for coming and making that comment. I appreciate that. I think I'm ready just to move on from this, and with your help, I'm going to try to stay committed and continue to serve my community the best I can. So I'd like to thank everyone up here for that, and we're just going to move on from there. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Koss, second by Mr. Rapp. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.